Hello, this is Jim Ruff. Welcome to the Jim Ruff Show. Today I'm here again with my friend Paul Everett, who's driven up from Shelton to be here with us. Thanks, Paul.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
And we're doing the fourth in a series of shows, and the idea here is to explore this concept of the Wisdom Council as applied to society and how it would change the paradigm or shift the paradigm. And Paul's challenging me on this, a lot of the ideas on this, and today we may not stay on that topic. We're mostly interested in the corporation and the corporate paradigm. So welcome, Paul. And
now let's begin by you quickly saying what the Wisdom Council is set to do, shall we say, or create.
Okay, so it's true. I have a solution idea that I think will reform the corporation, will change the system. And basically what it involves, currently what it involves, in my mind, is a random selection of citizens. 12 citizens get randomly selected once a quarter. And these people meet and are dynamically facilitated in a period of 3 days or so to come up with unanimous statements that are presented to a large audience and to a television audience and hopefully to the whole country. And the idea is that this group presents its unanimous conclusions and the whole country visits for a minute about it in small groups. And then people check through the web and so forth and realize that we're all pretty much in agreement, or if we're not in agreement, then we carry on the dialogue until a new random group is selected in 3 months. And we'll get into some of the reasons why I think this simple tweak to our underlying system will transform a lot of things and make life a lot better for us.
Okay.
So,
well, the last several times, 3 things have emerged strongly for me. Two of them you've already covered. They come to a unanimous consensus. Now that's pretty good, to come to a unanimous consensus on some kind of statement on a subject statement, like healthcare or the corporation or whatever. And then this statement is used by we the people to have further discussions. The piece that you didn't cover is that the nature of the Wisdom Council is systemic. That is, it's really a systems change. It's not a tweak. You say tweak, but it isn't. It's a significant change in how important issues are brought to the fore in our democracy, so to speak. We were talking about how the Constitution was created last time, which was that these folks all got together in Philadelphia. I remember being there and reading about the fact that they had sergeants at arms at the doors and nobody could get in, and these folks were cloistered for quite a long period of time. Was it weeks?
4 months.
4 months.
Almost
4 months.
3.5 months.
3.5 months. They were cloistered, and they struggled with how to bring forth something truly new, which they did in the form of the Constitution. And it was only after they had worked their way through everything that it was in fact brought out and presented to the various colonies or states that had to approve it at that time. You also said a very interesting thing. You said that we have been on mechanical autopilot since that time, and that this is predicated on the rule of law, okay, and that there are no provisions for us to reassemble and revisit the original Constitutional Convention. You further said that this competition that you claim is built into the Constitution, the way we set up the government, is useful only when competitors are independent, but you're saying that the world and the United States, states in the United States, are becoming more interdependent, and so a competitive ethos is, I believe in your view, no longer viable.
As the primary.
As the primary, yeah, okay. And you hypothesized that we need a new system because the corporation emerged, and that's part of our subject here, the corporation emerged out of this competitive system. and set up by the Constitutional Convention, and which assumed independent entities competing with each other. Have I said that fairly accurately?
Yeah, except the corporation really arose as being a legal entity all by itself in the end of the 18th century. Not, in other words, so it was really the constitutional structure set in motion some forces that eventually got realized at the end of the 18th century, or 19th century, at the end of the 19th century, when the corporation was deemed by the Supreme Court to be a legal person.
A legal entity, but large, I mean, large companies, I guess that's the only thing I can say, existed before the corporation was recognized as a legal entity.
Yeah.
So it had already grown. The reason it needed to be recognized was because it had gotten very powerful.
Yes.
Okay. So when I looked at these, you said further that the competitive system is based on self-interest only.
Primarily.
Primarily self-interest.
Yeah.
And that's not serving the community.
Right.
Because they're only interested in profit. Now, I think I've gotten that all pretty right. So these statements provoked an array of questions in my mind as I was thinking about this, and I don't have a neat and logical sequence to put all these questions into, so with apologies to the audience and that sort of stuff. But let's look at some of the things. Let's begin with one of the more provocative statements that you made, which was that our current system is based on competition, and in an interdependent world, that will no longer work. So my question then is, how will the deliberations of the Wisdom Council speak to that? And what do you imagine we will be changing to, if not a competitive system? And how do you imagine that we will no longer have self-interest, but instead will serve the general interest?
Yeah.
So those are two
Those are great.
huge
Great questions. Huge questions, yeah.
And
Yeah.
because
And it's
I
really
think we really have to challenge that.
okay. Good. Well, I get challenged on it a lot, actually. But basically, to me, it's about priorities. It's like it's as if you and I woke up in a basketball game.
But may I interrupt just a moment?
Go ahead.
I want the audience to know that you have not seen these questions beforehand
Right.
in any case on any of the
No,
programs.
I haven't. No.
So that they know that you're answering spontaneously from your construct.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So, but
The basketball.
yeah, so it's like you and I were born into a basketball game. And the basketball game is this competitive structure that's been there all our lives. Mm-hmm. And all I've invented is something called a timeout, where I'm not saying we get rid of the basketball game. I'm just saying there's a timeout, that we need a timeout. And that if we were to call timeout and step outside of the game for a moment, mm-hmm. it would be the first time in 200 and some years that we've done that mm-hmm. as a we the people, as a society. And I suspect we would discover that we aren't really competitive as we thought we were. I mean, that our competitiveness isn't so total in us, and our self-interest isn't so dominating. That in fact, another part of us is our desire to serve humanity. Mm-hmm. And what we've set up right now is a system where that is muted. That's diminished. If you want to serve humanity, we don't have really provisions for that. You basically have to get a job somehow, and how do you get a job? Well, it either serves your self-interest or it serves the corporate self-interest, which is, we have these artificial entities that are totally self-interest driven, and so basically what happens is that every person in this society has to somehow figure out how to go through that filter of self-interest in order to earn a living. And then the hope is, the theory is that all that self-interest will translate into something that serves the collective, mm-hmm. which it did when we were independent. Now that we're becoming interdependent, it does so less and less all the time.
Why does it not serve the collective? Because the corporation bringing, okay, the audience also needs to know my bias.
Yes.
My bias is that the corporation is one of the greatest things that was ever invented. Why? Because it allows for the aggregation of sufficient resources in the form of capital, labor, structures, and so forth, and thought, okay, creativity. It allows that to come together in a sufficiently large, it's like a catalytic chamber that transforms that whole thing into something that humankind needs. And you couldn't afford the way the automobiles used to be built before the assembly line. That was a genius move on the part of Ford. We couldn't afford the independent person who's creating a vase, we'll say, because there aren't enough vase makers in the United States that would be willing to work for what you'd be willing to pay for it. So what's happened is the corporation then has in fact been a wealth generating entity because of its ability to aggregate the elements that I talked about. So then the question is, what does the Wisdom Council do that doesn't harm people's ability to have their needs served in the society at a price they can pay?
Yeah, I'm not arguing against or dissing in any way the ability of people to come together and work together for the common good. That's not what I'm in fact,
not
what the
for the common
yeah,
good,
the
for the
corporation
corporate
does.
good.
Yeah, the
For
corporation,
corporate good.
or even for the corporate good.
Yeah.
But I think there's the corporation is one way, one invention that could be done, and it does it through private interest. It does it really by exporting as much as possible the costs to whoever. I mean, you and I used to work for a timber company, and if we could get the National Park Service to pay for the trees as much as possible, well, we'd be thrilled to do that. We want to export those costs as much as possible, and if we spray for herbicides or something when there's a drift to the neighbors, well, we hope they don't mind too bad because we're not going to worry about it that much and because we've followed the rules. So it isn't really the corporate entity which gives us all these benefits, really is kind of a very suboptimal approach. I would think that there's a lot better approaches that could be established. But
you don't have a specific better approach.
Oh, I do.
What you're saying is that the Wisdom Council will develop that.
Right, and I think the Wisdom Council in corporations will develop that too. To me, the Wisdom Council approach will structure us as people to figure out how to come together and serve the collective good as opposed to the stakeholders. I mean, not as opposed to, but in addition to.
Okay.
Right now, the corporation.
When you say opposed to, I
don't
think you mean that.
Yeah, I don't mean that. No, I don't want to say
okay.
no. Right now, there's only one stakeholder.
In addition to.
Yeah, the people that own the company are really the only stakeholders that the corporation pays attention to. It waves its arm about the triple bottom line and worrying about the environment and everything else, but that's all just talk because the real bottom line is the bottom line, and the bottom line is for those who own the stock.
Well,
and so if you and I work for the company and the company sees fit to get rid of us, we're not really part of that community anymore. We're just gone, or the company decides to move its headquarters. It's just gone because its real dedication is to the usually wealthy stockholders.
Well, not necessarily. Many stockholders, like in General Electric and et cetera and so forth, are just common, ordinary, everyday folks. I mean, there's 60 million stockholders in the United States now.
Right,
Those
right.
are not wealthy people.
No, but the distribution of wealth
I
in
know,
our
the
society is absolutely ridiculous.
I know what no,
and-
it's not ridiculous, but it is a difficult curve.
Well, it's not a curve.
Yeah,
It's
it
a
is.
straight line and met by another straight line. Yeah, it's so bad. But anyway, I think yes, the Wisdom Council in play at a national level would restructure things enough that we would begin to form other kinds of allegiances and awarenesses. But I think also, having said that, let me just say that the step of setting up a Wisdom Council doesn't eliminate the corporation. It's no threat to the corporation. It just is speaking to the personness within the corporation rather than their corporate loyalties. In other words, when you and I worked for Simpson Timber Company, for instance, yeah, we worked from 8 to 5 or whatever, and we worked hard to.
You worked from 8 to 5?
I forgot to tell you. I forgot to tell you that. Paul,
I know better.
They need to know that my Paul was my boss at that time,
He never had a boss. Don't let him fool you.
But anyway, we had a loyalty. We had a job to do, and the job was
Right.
to maximize the revenue, the return to the stockholders, to the investment of the stockholders, and that was what we did. And then we would go and we would put our personhood lives on, and we would now serve the family or the local community or whatever else that we would put that hat on. And this is the Wisdom Council is a way for us to wear that hat and pretty much full time, and also to be a part of a corporation that with other people that are wearing that hat. So I think it mentally would switch a lot of things around just by itself.
Well, I'm sure it would make a shift in viewpoint. I'm sure that's true. I think that you and I, in our work, in fact,
No, wait a minute.
had
Our group was over the top. You're right. You're
over
right.
the top.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, our group, we actually had that, and that was due to
You bet.
your management. But I don't know. It's been a hard time finding other groups like that in corporate America.
Okay, well, let's move on, because I had another challenge, although I do want to say something about profit. People look at profit as a dirty word, and I don't. I see profit as that which enables the future. Because a corporation that doesn't make a profit dies, and all the jobs that were there go with it. Now, sometimes it should die, because it is not meeting the needs of its customers in a way that the customers are willing to pay. And the wonderful thing about a lack of profit is that it takes those resources away from those who are unable to meet the needs of the customer in a way they're willing to pay, and gives it to somebody who is, by the millions of choices that are being made every day by the people in the United States who have the freedom to do that. And they have such a vast array of choice that you sometimes wonder how in the world they do it. But they do. And they do it, in fact, stunningly, in the next period of time up until the new year. They're going to spend $250 billion with a B dollars.
Yeah,
That's a lot of money.
First of all, what you just described is a theoretical situation that
It's
existed.
a real situation.
Well, it's kind of a real situation, but it was far more real in the past than it is today, in my view. In other words, it assumes that there's this level playing field, that the corporations are competing on this level playing field, that I mean,
No, it doesn't.
a lot of...
No, it doesn't assume that. It doesn't assume a level playing field. What it assumes is that the individual or the newly emerging something has strength, has the space to emerge. Let's take, I can tell a real quick story here. When Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, who was the premier or anyway, the head of France, was visiting Stephen Jobs in California and was talking about the emergence of the Apple computer and so forth. And he said, why don't we have these kinds of things in France? And Jobs looked at him and he said, because you have laws against it. And those laws include not being able to start something in your garage. And I hope you understand that Apple computers started in our garage. Yeah. And so the point is that it wasn't a level playing field, because who were they coming out against? IBM.
Well, no, I meant the rules were fair. In other words, when you have a new industry, you pretty much have a level playing field because there's no dominant force in the thing. And that's really what was happening with the PCs, is it was a new industry. And IBM happened to turn its software over to Microsoft, and off they went. So, and that, even they had an unfair advantage. But the point is that if I'm making landmines or airplanes,
take airplanes.
or, yeah, especially jet fighters or something like that, I have a tremendous ability to go into Congress and lobby for jet airplanes. And I can put advertisements on. I've got a lot of money. I can put advertisements on TV to say, gee, the threat of the Soviets at the time, is a horrible thing. And
it was real, by the way.
Well, it was, all right, maybe it was real. But also the real is the need for better education and the need for infrastructure in our streets and so forth. But there's no company there to advertise for those expenditures in Congress. And so every so often we have these, we lo and behold find ourselves in this war because of the fear that was hyped up, or in my mind hyped up, but it's a tremendous opportunity to make money for the people who make uniforms or shoes or whatever else. Yeah.
But what you're saying then is you're really arguing about the allocation of resource.
Well, I'm saying that the corporate structure, yes, that one piece is the allocation of resources.
Right.
Another piece is the education system that it provides. I mean, right now, if you had a child, if we had a child anymore,
I had 4.
But they're grown. A young child is going to watch TV, and they're going to learn all kinds of things about, what kind of foods to eat, and what kind of how they think about their bodies, and whether they're pretty or not, if they happen to be. Not this lithe, slim thing with the right kind of lips or whatever. I mean, that is an education program that's happening to our families and to us, that if we had any collective intelligence, if we could step outside and call that time out I'm talking about, we wouldn't choose that.
Okay.
We would say we don't want that. But because we're on automatic pilot, and because we have these very powerful entities that are doing whatever they can to earn a profit, which is what the game says to do, we are, in my opinion, driving ourselves off a cliff. I mean, I don't think the environment could sustain it. I don't think our culture can sustain it. I'm not sure.
So you're seeing the Wisdom Council as a timeout that is going to raise the consciousness of people about these issues.
Yes. Okay. And about it's not so much only about our issues, but also to transform our whole thinking, our whole way of relating to one another.
Boy, I sure hope you're right.
Well,
because you see, the problem is that now you're getting back to the thing I said on the first program, which was that it's an issue of consciousness.
Yeah.
And most people believe they're already conscious.
Right.
So why are they going to seek it? There's no reason to seek it. So
the reason why.
You're saying the Wisdom Council will jar them a little bit.
Well, the Wisdom Council starts with the problem.
Yeah.
In other words, when you assemble a Wisdom Council, a randomly group of people, the facilitator stands and says, "What are some of the issues we might talk about?"
Right.
And gets a list.
Right.
So everybody has deep concerns, whether it's gay marriages or it's the loss of the environment or it's the war in Iraq or you name it, they have concerns. And so you find that energy that people are worried about.
And then King County taking 65% of my land and telling me I can't use it.
All right, so that would be your issue. But then we would talk about those issues. We would come up with consensus, unanimous statements about those issues. Actually, it's not about finding the statement. It's about trying to solve the problem and then and then capturing the best consensus we've got on that problem.
But that's a solution that they're capturing the consensus
Sometimes
on.
it's a solution.
Most of the time.
Well, sometimes it's a statement of the problem, sometimes it's a solution, sometimes it's a question.
Okay.
So but yeah, most of the time it is kind of, well, I don't know if I could say that. Most of the time it's actually a statement of the problem.
Okay.
People say, I mean, like we did one for a corporation, and the group just recently basically said, I don't feel safe here. I don't feel safe sexual harassment. I don't feel safe psychological harassment. I don't feel safe physical getting equipment I need. I don't feel safer. So, but that was in the first reaction, everybody was, that can't be true. Well, and then once they start thinking about it, they go, well, this randomly selected group has said it is true unanimously. So by God, we're going to do something about that now. So all of a sudden, management and everybody else is tripping over themselves to say, what in the hell is this this problem, and how do we solve it? How do we get this taken care of? Well, it's taking stuff out of denial and putting it on the center stage and forcing us to look at it, and then all of a sudden, we already have the solutions for a lot of this stuff. We've already got them in our pockets and everywhere else, but we have no mechanism, no way to bring them into the national consciousness and into the national dialogue so we can act on these things. We have better models than corporations right now. We have better models than the...
We don't know they're better models.
Well,
we know they're different.
Right, or we have
We
suggested
don't know they're
improvements that are the kind where you would slap your head and go, oh, why didn't I think of that? This is great.
Maybe. Maybe. Okay. Now, there was another thing that, and I'm going to slip away from the corporation. How much time do we have?
Just about 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah.
You said that there was no way to reassemble and revisit the Constitution.
Well, or just to become we the people.
But that really isn't true, is it? Because we have a process. A constitutional convention can be called by the states. Is that not true?
Well, it's really difficult.
But it can be done.
I mean, it really can't be done. Paul, the key piece is the we the people. Now, there was a we the people in 1787, I think.
Right.
Or something very close to it. I mean, it wasn't quite true because it didn't include blacks and it didn't include women and et cetera, property holders.
Right.
But for the times, it really was a we the people. Pretty much everybody said, hey, let's try this new Constitution with the Bill of Rights.
Right.
Okay, so at that time, there really was a sense of we the people. That's what's there. Now, those guys had a special moment that really allowed them, and they had special people that allowed them to create a we the people. They had a Ben Franklin and I don't know that we have really. They have there's a structure there, but I don't know if any state representative can establish a constitutional convention, and I would feel part of it. But the Wisdom Council could. I think we have to actually stop here pretty soon. So
okay.
Did you?
Well, we also have a way of tweaking the Constitution through a constitutional amendment.
Yes.
And we have done that a number of times.
Yes.
And we have even taken out some of the amendments we've put in.
Yes.
So it can be changed.
Yes. And that's what my book is about, as you know, a constitutional amendment.
Right.
And now I know we don't have to have that.
We don't have to have that. Right.
But we have to stop.
But we have to stop and see. Okay. All right. Well.
So, but can we come back, Paul? Can you come back?
Yes, I can come back, but we'll get really deep into this, and I don't know if you're going to lose all your audience because this is going to get really esoteric.
All right, Paul, the credits are running. Thank you very much for coming, Paul. Thank you for running the credits, Gary. And thank you for Cliff, and thank you, Donatus.
I think Donatus needs a wisdom council for his energy idea.